اللهم لك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد من بعد الرضا. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا زدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارزقنا الإخلاص في القول والعمل. So alhamdulillah, tonight is the 5th night of Ramadan, and as we've gone through these nights and we've hopefully taken in some of the beauty of these first ajza of the Quran. We've completed now Surah Al-Baqarah, the longest surah in the Quran, Surah Ali Imran. And now tonight, inshallah, continuing along that path, we are in the midst of Surah An-Nisa. And the 5th juz of the Quran is completely covered by Surah An-Nisa. So some of it was started last night, and it will be the whole salah will be still Surah An-Nisa, and will be finished tomorrow night, inshallah. So again, one of the Sab'at Tiwal, one of the 7 long surahs of the Quran. And there is an order, right? We talked about on the first night, Surah Al-Baqarah being the answer to the dua that we begin in Surah Al-Fatiha. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance to and on the straight path. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us or gives us the answer to that dua in Surah Al-Baqarah. That this is the manhaj, this is the methodology, the path of the believers, right? This is the Muslim personality with examples and with all of the different ordinances and regulations and legislations that are sent down by Allah Azza wa Jal. Then you have Surah Ali Imran that comes after that. That is a follow-up, and that is giving us, okay, you know what the straight path is, what it looks like, what it's defined by. And now Surah Ali Imran is teaching us how to remain steadfast and firm on that straight path. Right, so much of it, of Surah Ali Imran, is giving us both the internal and the external tools and what is needed to remain, to have this istiqamah or this thabat. And so that's why in that surah, if you noticed, that it's more than any other surah in the Quran contains dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because an integral element of guidance and remaining on the straight path is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows for us to be on that straight path, that He gives us the tawfiq for it. So you have in that surah the dua, رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً. You have these du'as in this surah that give this meaning. And now in Surah An-Nisa, and by the way, when we say, just to make a clarification here, when I say, or when someone says the theme of this surah is this or that, this is not necessarily something definitive, right? The words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are far greater than what we can encompass in, a small summary, or to say that this is the only goal or purpose of these surahs, right? So you will find many different perspectives, many different ways to categorize, to understand these surahs, right? But what we can take is that each surah is giving us a well-packaged and complete, comprehensive look into either one topic or several topics, giving us a special perspective or understanding, okay? And so when we say that now the theme of Surah An-Nisa, because, kind of going through it and hearing and reading from different mufassirin and scholars, that you have different understandings of what you can say like the goal or the overall theme of Surah An-Nisa is. But it came down from what I came across to 2 main things, right? Number 1 is the concepts of mercy and justice, right? And if you were to boil down the Islam into like what are the most, stark or apparent important qualities or characteristics that Islam comes with and brings, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say it's these 2, right? Al-adl wal-rahma. And both of them, they go hand in hand, right? And so you'll find within this surah a tremendous amount of emphasis and detail on establishing justice, right? But that justice also coming with mercy. Okay, that's on one side. On the other side, you have in this surah a focus on building a community, right? And the different levels of emphasis or focus on building a community, right? And that it starts inside the home with the family, okay? And then it works its way out. And so in the beginning of this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us first of our common origin. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء. Right? That it starts with this concept of the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognizing that we all came from the same forefather. Right? خلقكم من نفس واحدة, which means what? It goes back to the same concept of justice, of equality, that no person has a right or a status over any other person except in taqwa, because we all came from the same origin. But then in that also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us to have taqwa of Allah when it comes to al-arham, meaning our kinship and our family. And you will see, especially in the beginning of the surah, a heavy focus on this, right? Having this justice and mercy with those who we have responsibility towards, especially those who are under our care and those who are under our protection, right? Our family members. It starts inside of the home, right? When it comes to our spouses, when it comes to our children, and then it works its way out. And so you will find in this surah, in the beginning part of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about marriage, talking about who's allowed for us to marry and who's not, and giving us the rules and the responsibilities and the rights, and then also how to deal with, marital discord and issues and problems that come up. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also talking about the rights of those who are most vulnerable in the society. So you have an emphasis on the orphans, for example, right? And having justice and mercy towards the orphans, the woman in the society. And the entire surah, the surah is called Surah An-Nisa, right? And the scholars, they say this surah, more than any other surah in the Quran, is talking about and making mention of women. And this shows, the position and the vital role that they have in the society. So this surah also lays out when it comes to justice on issues of wealth, right? That women are deserving of and have a right to inheritance. And this was something that now we say, okay, that makes sense, and of course they do, but at the time that these verses were revealed, this was something that was really revolutionary, right? Because they did not give women inheritance. They said, how could or why would we give our inheritance to those who they don't participate in battles? They didn't consider them to be, really an important part of that public society. So they said, why would we do that? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His justice here, portions out and gives women and everyone what is rightfully theirs from inheritance, right? And so you will see in the beginning of the surah a heavy emphasis on justice when it comes to our relationships and responsibilities, and when it comes to wealth. Why? Because these are generally two of the areas where we find a lot of times people transgress against others, right? In their relationships, within their families, right? And when it comes to money. And that's why, especially the inheritance laws are very, very specific and laid out in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves no ambiguity there, because this is something, and I'm pretty sure everyone who's experienced this or has seen it, whether with family or friends, they recognize what happens when these rules are not followed, right? Or even when they are followed, still When you have some people who are not buying into it, or some people who think, what, it's not a big deal. I know when I pass away, or when someone passes away, we'll figure it out and we'll do things in the right way. It doesn't usually work like that, right? And it's usually one of the causes of some of the most difficult family experiences of families being separated over wealth and over money. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes and sets the rules here so that these things can be dealt with in a just way, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extends beyond that, right? So again, giving justice and being merciful with not just, it starts at home, like we said, with the individual, with the family, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extends outward. He says, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وبذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين والجار ذي القربى والجار الجنب والصاحب بالجنب وابن السبيل وما ملكت أيمانكم. Basically, every element of the society, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging us and pushing us towards ihsan, to treat everyone who we interact with and who we engage with from the inner circle. And this is the believer, subhanAllah, is that everyone who they engage with and they interact with feels their mercy, or at the very least is touched by their justice, right? And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages here. And one of, I think, my favorite part of this, so much through this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving these rules and giving these laws and setting a community aright, right? And He gives us, in some of these ayahs that are going to be recited, inshallah, in some of the first few rak'ahs, the purpose behind these, right? Sometimes you get bogged down and you say, okay, the rules of inheritance seem complicated, or who I can and who I can't marry. There's so many, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ this and that and this. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something very, very beautiful. This is really important for us to internalize. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ وَيَهْدِيَكُمْ سُنَنَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَيَتُوبَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. All of these things are for a purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends and wants to guide you and to make things clear for you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to forgive you. Wallahu alimun hakim. And Allah is the most knowledgeable and the most wise. So the path to this forgiveness and the path to this ease and the path to this clarity comes from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then He says again, Wallahu yuridu an yatuba alaykum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to forgive you. Right? How beautiful is that? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your Lord, who doesn't have any need for you, wants to forgive you, wants you to come back to Him. وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا. Those who are, other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are following their desires, who are following their whims, what do they want? That they want you to go astray. Right? يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to make things easy for you. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows our weaknesses. Right? And with that, Allah Azza wa Jal gives us these rules and gives us these laws and lays everything out clear for us to make things easy for us. And so all of these things, they may seem like they require hardship or difficulty, but actually at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually making things clear and easy for us, because we know that if Allah gives us this structure, that it's what's best for us. And it takes away from us a lot of the decision making, or a lot of the confusion, a lot of the hardship. Allah Azza wa Jal gives it to us. It's been packaged. It's our responsibility to recognize that He is Al-Alim Al-Hakim. This surah, more than any other surah in the Quran, also, if you listen to the end of the ayat, has the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned so many times. Alim and Hakim comes so many times. Ghafur Rahim comes so many times, because at the end of the day, this Quran that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is coming not to make things difficult for us, but so that we can be forgiven, so that we can be shown that mercy, and that comes from the one who is ultimately the most knowledgeable and the most wise. The more that we internalize this when we listen to the Quran, the more inshallah we will appreciate it and benefit from its gems and from its wisdoms. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this Quran a light for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it something that lifts and that removes our burdens and our difficulties. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that on this night, the 5th night, one of the nights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees people from the fire of hell, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us from those people that He writes down. وَمَا ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِعَزِيزٍ وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وجزاكم الله خير.